Yes. All right. So welcome, Heather. Welcome, everyone. This is the endorsement process interview of OR Massachusetts with Heather May, a candidate for state rep in the 25th district of Massachusetts. And Heather, I want to welcome you. And other people can introduce themselves as they ask questions, and that would be great. So Heather, why don't you just begin with a milquetoast question? Why are you running?
Why am I running? So I ran in 2022. And the reasons that I ran then are very similar to why I decided to run again. I think many of us have seen the Boston Globe articles and things like that recently that talk about how ineffective our legislature has been, in particular, the House of Representatives. And that we have one of the least transparent legislatures in the country. The lack of transparency to me is really completely antithetical to the process of democracy. And I think that from a local level to a federal level, we need to be protecting our democratic processes right now because they're in real danger. And so in looking at, what Waltham needed and wanted and how that was coming up against inaction on the state level, I decided that, I had had enough in 2022 and ran. We came within 300 votes in 2022. Things have gotten worse, not better. And so I'm running again in 2024 because I believe that we need to make some big structural changes on Beacon Hill if we're going to create a better Commonwealth for all of us, really.
Okay, so let me ask one more. You've opened up lots of interesting issues there. But let me ask one more before inviting others in. I know Robin has to leave early. So my next question is, in your mind, what are the key issues on which you and the incumbent differ, where you think you might be able to have an impact or hope to have an impact?
Sure. So it's something I talk about a lot because I am challenging a Democrat as a Democrat. So there are areas of overlap, but I think some of the biggest things are related to transparency and housing policy. With transparency, the incumbent has been in office for 23 years and has voted against any increased transparency rules or amendments, bills, et cetera, that would increase public participation. And so that's a huge area of difference. I believe that we need, not just need, but we have a right to know how our representatives are voting on everything, and especially in committee votes. We have, lots of examples of things going into committee, thinking that the committee is in favor, and then suddenly it gets sent to study, things like that. And we never get to know why. It's hard to hold people accountable if you can't know how they voted. So I think that that's one area that we differ a lot. And that also makes sense to me because as an incumbent, you know, I understand that when it's hard to hold you accountable, it's much easier for someone to do the politician thing of kind of equivocating on issues. And we need to be able to hold our elected officials accountable. So that's one big area. And then on housing policy, I think that while we have some areas of overlap, um, we have some really big differences when it comes to how do we handle funding for affordable housing. My opponent, the incumbent, is against the real estate transfer fee. I think that's an error in judgment. We absolutely need it. It did not make it into the housing bill. And so, you know, I think that those are two big areas where we differ a lot. I
Thank
see
you.
Robin's hand.
Yeah, yes, Robin.
So one question, I have two, but the first one is, so in order to combat, if you're elected, in order to combat the lack of transparency, will you make your votes known?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, and with the affordable housing transfer fee, I've kind of changed my mind on it to some extent because I feel like there need to be some adjustments made to it because these days seniors are being squeezed very uh, significantly financially, and sometimes the only resource they have is the value of their house. And it's
Yep.
costing us so much to retire and to pay for medical care in later years that if we put too much of a fee on those seniors and that's their only source of funds, I feel that that's not necessarily very progressive, actually.
So I understand exactly what you're saying. I've talked to a lot of seniors about that squeeze that they're feeling. And definitely, I think, you know, as housing costs skyrocket, that squeeze is being felt earlier and earlier in life. The real estate transfer fee, and especially at the state level, simply says that if your municipality wants to implement a real estate transfer fee, that you can. That is all it says at the state level. It says you can do this if you want to. It's giving you a tool within your town if you want to use it. The other thing is that cities and towns can craft that real estate transfer fee in a way that works for them. So if you want an exemption for seniors who have maybe lived in their house for a particular period of time, if you want an exemption for, you know, owner occupied units, you know, these kinds of things, the municipality can choose to do that. So I don't think there's any good reason to not look at it as progressive revenue because we have to have that influx of money to build the amount of affordable housing that we need. And we have so many, Waltham is a perfect example, so many either out of town, out of state, out of country developers who come in, buy properties, and basically flip them and are driving up our housing cost and giving nothing back to the communities. And so I do have to respectfully disagree. I think it is a very progressive way of getting that revenue specifically for affordable housing. And as long as we leave that flexibility for municipalities to be able to have caveats that they think are needed for their particular situation, I think that it's a great way to be able to increase that revenue.
Robin, you want to follow up? Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree that people flipping houses for profit should definitely be taxed. I just worry, I look at my own town and we have a huge budget deficit. And so actually it's kind of beneficial to the town to chase low-income seniors out of here and entice, wealthier people to move in order to help fund everything. So I feel like there are pressures on towns and municipalities to do things that are not necessarily progressive. So they may institute these fees at the highest level without any provisions made for people who aren't in that situation where they can afford it. So that's my only caveat about this. I agree that we need more money for affordable housing. I don't know if this should be the sole way that we fund affordable housing. That's all. So
Hmm.
I just wanted to get your thoughts.
And I don't think that it could be the sole way, because housing is it's a multi-pronged issue. And that's why I think at the state level, we need to be giving municipalities as many tools as they can use to help combat whatever their housing crisis looks like. And I think that, in particular municipalities like you're describing, then that becomes a city council or a town meeting issue of, if you don't want this to apply to a certain group, then you get to, advocate for it on a local level for what would be best.
All right. Anyone else want to follow up? Or Robin, do you want to have one more? Because again, I know you have to leave.
No, I'll leave it there. I mean, I worry about the implementation of the rule, that's all.
Yep.
Martha?
So I love bringing more decision-making back to localities. I just think we've centralized all the decision-making with the state legislature, and mayors and first selectmen and elected leadership in our towns and cities have such a limited repertoire of places to look for revenue. So that makes sense to me. But I also understand why it's still another fight for for seniors whose biggest asset are their homes. So I get it, Robin. My question for Heather was, you came so close the last time to winning, and I'm wondering, do you have confidence this time that you will win, and do you have a path to victory?
Yeah, so yes, I have confidence that we are going to win this time. I think that we have put into place a couple of strategies that we just maybe didn't think about last time. It was our first time, running at a state level, and especially targeting new voters. So Waltham has had a lot of turnover in terms of people leaving to go somewhere cheaper, and a lot of new people coming in. And so we have really kind of targeted new voters by sending welcome letters, specific mailers to new voters, and just kind of, making sure that we're a one of the first welcomes that they get, and then following up with them. And so bringing in, hopefully, those new voters. We have also, as I'm sure happens in many municipalities, we have a couple of, I guess you would call them apartment complexes, developments that are considered private property, no trespassing. It's incredibly hard to canvass there. And those, unfortunately, for those voters, it means that they often don't get any exposure to candidates. And with the lack of local news sources these days, that compounds the problem even further with getting information about local and state level elections. And so we have, again, focused on identifying people within those developments that have held meet and greets for us. We have a couple coming up this week, actually, and then doing targeted mailers to those as well. So definitely using the data that we had from 2022 and creating the strategies to help us go after those votes that maybe were left on the table last time.
Thank you. Back to Robin.
So Martha brought up a subject that I've been thinking about a lot, and that is local control versus like regional or state control. And I see that the governor and our legislators have been trying to take away a lot of local control in a lot of the legislation that they've been proposing lately. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One is, or at least one example is in the climate bill, which did not pass because the House and the Senate couldn't agree on it. But there are provisions in there to speed up the process for energy and solar siting, etc. And there's already very little local control over some of it between the energy companies and etc. And this would put it on steroids because it would absolutely take away all the the whole public process pretty much, or most of it, from those issues. And I feel that that's wrong. And I understand that it's a trade-off because they want to create the infrastructure for energy, for climate issues faster. But I feel like going all the way of taking away all the local control is not right. And, it's already hard enough. I'm sure you're familiar with the issue that's a Waltham, Lexington, Cambridge issue about the solar siting at the Cambridge Reservoir. So I just was wondering what your thoughts about those issues are.
Sure. I would say, first of all, kind of just in general, I think not passing a climate bill in this session is indicative of the system that we see growing on Beacon Hill. This top-down system, and where nobody talks to each other until the last couple of months, and then suddenly we have Democrats arguing with Democrats about things within climate bills where we should be fairly close together on policy before we even get to joint committees. And I just think it's criminal that they did not pass a climate bill, especially as I'm out knocking on doors in 95-degree heat and 80% humidity every day. But I think, you know, you're absolutely right. We have seen a lot of local, you know, issues coming up. And I think we're finding out that one of the reasons Massachusetts is ineffective in its legislature is that the legislature has its hands in everything, and sometimes in a lot of things that it does not need to be in, or that it just needs to have kind of an oversight role instead of, you know, being in the details, in the weeds, if you will. Solar siting, things like that. I think there are a couple of different, you know, ways to look at it in terms of the policy. We definitely, everything needs to be approached with a equity and justice framework. So we cannot continue to try to, you know, save our planet on the backs of our Black and brown communities. We cannot do that. And Massachusetts is just as guilty of it as anywhere else. However, I would say that there's nothing that precludes us from allowing local administrations to kind of have the ultimate, you know, the ultimate sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? To be able to let our local governments look at where should this be, right? Where should this be cited? And to the local administrations know their communities, they know their landscape, they know what their needs are. And so, yes, I 100% agree with that. I think there are some places, like let's say in Waltham, our new high school has a parking garage, and there's a covered part, and it, in my opinion, should have been built with solar, but it wasn't. Sightings for already developed land could be expedited, absolutely. Non-developed land, that's another story. And I think that Robin is correct. We need to be able to have a much more participative process for those kinds of things.
Right, you hit it exactly right, from my opinion, and from the activism I've been engaged in. I mean, I think it's Audubon Society came out with a study that said we have enough developed land to put solar on in this state that would meet our needs, rather than cutting down forests and farmland and etc. We do not need to be doing that. And I'm worried because taking away all local control gives a lot of control to corporations, actually,
Hmm?
and to eminent domain and the energy companies. And I don't think that's the right way to go about this, even though I think the permitting process needs to be expedited in some way. It's sort of throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
So I'm going to go back to the transparency issue. A minority of legislators over the years have recognized the need to change the process. And many of them have then been confronted by the leadership and face the need to resign because they felt so ineffective, or stayed on and in some cases were effectively marginalized. And my question is, have you thought out a strategy whereby you can bring this issue to the fore, but not commit suicide?
I won't pretend that I have a complete answer to that question, because if I did, I'd be perhaps, running for a federal office. But but here's what I would say. So I've taken a lot of the lessons that I learned from being a union organizer at Emerson, where I'm currently teaching, and the fact that secrecy only seeks to serve those who are in power. And so for me, as when we were organizing the union, as a non-tenured faculty member, which means I can be let go pretty much without cause at any point in time. How do I, protect myself and at the same time do this work? What I found out was to be loud, to talk about it to anyone and everyone who would listen, to make sure that people who are trying to keep things secret are put on blast. Because what impact does that have on me? None. They need to figure out, why are you keeping it secret? And I think that we've seen with the Boston Globe, with the growth of social media, that keeping those things secret is becoming harder and harder for people to do. I think it's also become more common knowledge, and that's what I'm finding on the doors when I'm talking to people, that the lack of transparency is getting in the way of everything else. Now, I definitely know that there are, people who have tried to stand up to leadership, and like you said, they either get marginalized to the point of being ineffective, or they just give up, right? We have a growing number of more progressive oriented representatives, especially because the problem is larger in the House than it is in the Senate. It's not there in the Senate, but it's smaller. And I have been, I've been watching and listening and learning, like, what does an Erica Eiderhoven do that allows her to be loud and a strong advocate for very progressive things, and also to be effective in some of the things that she wants to get done. Same with Representative Connolly, and looking at how do they, sort of strike that balance. There is a balance. I also, and this is just my personality, that if grown adults want to come in my office and yell at me about something, that's fine. They can do that. It's not going to hurt my feelings. So, my friends and family make fun of me because I like to, like, decorate everything. I decorate all of my notebooks. And so my husband says that even if they move my desk into the restroom in the basement, it will still be more aesthetically pleasing. So I think that there is an increase in the pressure on the leadership to figure this problem out. And I think a part of the role of a progressive representative would be to continue to put that pressure on them. And then at the same time, to create those relationships and those coalitions with others who want to be more progressive, because there is safety in numbers. And that, again, that's one of the lessons from the union organizing, is that is a way to help protect each other.
Right. Okay.
So I don't know if that's an answer specifically, but that's my feelings on it.
Well, to be honest, I hesitate to press you to be more specific. All right. So let me, so I don't see any hands. So let me ask a question that goes back to housing. People in the field have estimated that we need in the range of 200,000 housing units in order to have a significant impact on the housing crisis within the state. At the same time, we have, because of the high demand, we have an inflexible price structure. Putting units on the market is not going to drive down pricing, certainly not very fast. The question is, since that limits the ability of the market economy to meet housing needs, what innovations do you favor to provide new housing units for the many who need them, particularly those in low and modest incomes ranges?
Yeah, I think so especially with housing, there are multiple pain points, right? And so we have to have a couple of different solutions that we're working to implement. I think that rent stabilization has to be on the table because, like you said, we can increase the units as much as we want, but I moved to Boston, oh goodness, 26 years ago. I just turned 51, so I had to do new math there. But even then, it was a less than 1% vacancy rate. And that in and of itself keeps prices high. And so we can increase the units, which we absolutely have to do. But we also have to have some oversight as to what rents are being charged for those units. And for landlords, I say it's the same kind of idea as a minimum wage, right? So because landlords love to say, well, you're affecting my income. You can't tell me, well, yes, we do that all the time. It's part of the role of government is to make sure that, we're not, to make sure that greed is not winning. And right now, greed is winning. It's by a large, large margin. So we have to put something like rent stabilization on the table. Rent stabilization also is, I think it's horribly misunderstood. A lot of landlords think, we're going to tell them you can only charge $1,000 a month for this 4-bedroom apartment. I'm like, no, that's not it. It's just looking at percentages, saying you can't, go over a certain percentage and increase so that people can plan and so that we stabilize where those prices are going. And then, I also think that, and the housing bond bill that we just passed has a lot of really great things in it. But one thing that it doesn't really do is mandate the building of low income and below market rate affordable housing. So to me, like we can continue to build, but if we're building luxury apartments, that doesn't help anyone. So we have to work with developers and we have to think about it from a policy standpoint as we are making sure that we have multiple levels of housing that are coming with this increased inventory.
Robin?
I totally agree with you on those points. One thing that I feel is not on people's radar enough is helping small businesses, and rental caps would be useful there too, because we're losing so many of our small mom and pop businesses because real estate prices are so outrageous. A lot of people are being driven out of their storefronts, for example, because they can't afford it anymore. A lot of buildings are becoming luxury housing developments that were formerly businesses, and I think that's a bad trend. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think here in Waltham, we see both of those things happening. So I think, yes, commercial renting and rentals has to be looked at as well, because we need to small businesses are the best thing for the economy because they employ local people. They are often very locally focused, and that money almost entirely goes right back into the local economy. My husband runs a small business, so I might be biased, but from what I've read, I believe that to be true. And so I think we have to be able to help, Moody Street in Waltham, which is our, our main drag, and great restaurants, and used to have a lot of really wonderful kind of mom and pop stores. We now have several empty storefronts. And in talking to those people, it's exactly what you're saying, Robin. It's that, the rent, some multinational corporation comes in, buys a building, and raises the rent, in some cases, anywhere from, 2 to 400%. People can't absorb that. And so what happens is they leave, and in a place like Waltham, we have a hard time replacing. And, that isn't helpful to not only just the economy in general, but also it starts to hurt the other businesses in that municipality as well, because it's unsightly, right? Like, we have this stretch at the very beginning of Moody Street in Waltham, if you've been here lately. Um, it's called the construction zone, but that's because it used to be like a maker space kind of business. But it's just this huge empty storefront with, graffiti and papered up windows and, things like that. And we need to be able to bring, small businesses in, and give them the resources that they need as well. And that includes also the affordable housing, because the people that work there have to be able to live somewhere.
Martha?
Yeah. Can I just follow up?
Yeah.
So I am a small business person and an artist with an artistic business, and I've seen my own rent go up 4 times in only a few years because my original landlords got too old, sold off the buildings. The new landlords came in and jacked the rents all the way up. And
Yep.
I'm facing probably having to lose that space and not sure where I'll go. And as an artist, there have been less and less spaces available for artists, and we're losing a lot of our arts and culture here because we don't support it enough. So I was just wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
I mean, I agree entirely. And I think that there's probably a lot more that we could do to help fund artistic spaces across the state. My mother-in-law is a painter. My husband, my brother-in-law, my husband's brother, is a furniture maker, and so I understand for, artisans to make a living doing this amazing thing, we have to support that. And I would absolutely be an advocate for thinking about and looking at different ways that we can address that through policy.
Thank you. Martha?
I just wondered first, before I ask my question, how long are we going? What's our endpoint?
We're definitely going to end by 1. We may end earlier than that, depending on the number of questions.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, so I was actually just going to follow up on Robin's line of questioning. There was a wonderful article in the Globe about Paris being very intentional with Parisian-owned or government-owned property to something like 25% of rental property belongs to the city, to Paris, and they definitely scale it to income so that a diversity of people with different incomes can afford to live there, because they feel that's really important just to continue life in the city. So your teachers, your cleaning people, your restaurant workers can live there. But they also had something like 19% of the commercial real estate, which they also prorated, because they felt like the variety of businesses was essential to life in the city. And I'm just wondering if, Heather, have you come across this? I mean, it's kind of like social housing and social real estate, and involves the use of city funds. Thanks.
Yeah, I immediately thought of, and I don't know, I haven't lived there in a while, but I was thinking of the Armory in Somerville, which I believe the city bought, and then turned that into a lot of different spaces for different kinds of artists. And I don't know what the rental agreements in that case are, but I think that things like that are definitely something that we should support at the state level, in terms of, because a lot of what we do at the state level is identify and find the funds to fund these wonderful projects. And so, I know there is a social housing pilot program that was funded, and I believe that was Representative Connolly's brainchild. And I'm very excited to see, that grow and develop. And I think we need more thinking like that. And I think expanding it into commercial spaces, it sounds like, I haven't seen that article, but I just noted it down, so I'll definitely go look at it. That's, we love that kind of, I think of it as like that European feel, where there's all of these different shops and different, everything from, the bakeries to the jewelry makers, of painters, and like, I'm thinking of bicycle fix-it people, because we have a bicycle fix-it group that has a thing every like Sunday morning that they do. But yeah, these bring in vastly different incomes. If we want all of these things, then we have to figure out how to make it livable for the people who are doing it. And I would 100% support those things, and definitely look into ways that how can we move some of these things along so that municipalities have the funds to be able to think about, you know, buying a commercial building and renting it out to different artisans and things like that. I think that's a great idea.
All right. In Cambridge, over the last few weeks, we've seen the creation of two separate types of alternative emergency response teams. One is operated through the city and cooperates with the police. The other contracts with the city, but uses trained personnel, but they respond completely independently of the police. My question is, have you given any thought as to, given the need, how those types of alternative emergency response teams could be fostered across the state?
Yeah, so I had the privilege of working for the Home for Little Wanderers for a couple of years as an in-home counselor. I have a degree in counseling psychology, and did a lot of crisis work. And those are just simply not situations where the police are trained how to respond. And even police, I have talked several times to the Waltham Police Department about the crisis response. And even when they have done some training in terms of how to work with people who have mental health challenges, that's not enough. It's not enough to be able to move through that situation, to help someone de-escalate, to be able to understand, like, the behaviors of someone who is autistic versus someone who's neurotypical. So I think, yeah, on the one hand, like, we have this expectation of our police forces to handle everything. That's been sort of the expectation historically. We realize that that's not a good model, because they are, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And those crisis response teams, I feel very strongly that those are an answer. Whether or not they work with the police directly, I would have some concerns about the influence of the police department over the crisis response team. But I'm interested to see kind of how that works in Cambridge with the two models there. But we need them. It's not brand new. There are, other states, cities across the world that have response teams like this. And I think if we want to lower the incidence of police brutality, of unjust arrests, all of these different things, we need these crisis teams, because they are the ones who are able to identify what's really going on when you have someone that you're responding to with a mental health challenge, especially serious mental health challenges that might even get in the way of them communicating at all with the police.
Thank you for that answer. So I'd like us to think about winding up. I want to give Heather a chance to make a final statement. Robin, do you have a comment or a question that can help
Yeah.
bring us home? Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it brings us home, but sort of related to what Heather was talking about, we now have the second highest homelessness population in the country. And I'm just wondering if you have thoughts on what to do about it. Also, added to that, we now have caps on how long immigrants and homeless people can stay in shelters. That seems very severe and heartless because there's no place for people to go, especially with home prices. So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think, there are a couple of different things. First of all, my personal value in terms of thinking about homelessness is that everyone deserves the right. They have a right to housing. Everyone deserves to have shelter. I have been incredibly disappointed. I get a little bit emotional about this topic. I have been incredibly disappointed with the policies of both Michelle Wu and Governor Healy in what seems to me as a way to make the homeless disappear from view without actually doing anything about homelessness. The restrictions on shelters, I mean, I don't understand looking at a system and saying this system is being, overtaxed because so many people need it. So let's just start kicking people out instead of extending what they need. We have a lot of empty buildings. We have a lot of underdeveloped land where maybe there was something at one point in time. I think we need to think about how are we going to expand the inventory that we have available to us when we have, immigrants who need extended time just to settle, right? They're resettling in a different country and, especially when you're looking at people who have come from traumatic situations. And I think that in many ways, homelessness is always traumatic on some level. And so, yeah, I think the limits that have been placed are, like you said, inhumane, because there's no alternative. There's nothing else. And I read something the other day where Maura Healey used the term reticketing, I think, reticketing for immigrant and refugee families, which in essence is just doing exactly what was done to them first, where they were just sent to us, right? Reticketing is in essence just sending them somewhere else. And we can't just keep sending people somewhere else. That's not a solution. Again, it's just it's putting blinders on. It's not actually doing anything to fix it.
Right. Again, thank you. And we're coming up to the hour, and here's your chance to give us a final message, Heather.
Sure. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you for putting this together and doing this. I know it's a little cobbled together from what your usual process is, and I am appreciative of the fact that everybody gave their time and was willing to be able to do this. I think that, you know, when we talk about things like, how are we going to fix transparency? How are we going to fix, you know, the homelessness? How are we going to fix climate change? That organizations like our revolution are the backbone of that advocacy. And my job as state rep would be to make sure that, you know, our revolutions of the state are being listened to in the same way that the real estate lobby is being listened to, in the same way that, you know, the different business lobbies are being listened to augment those voices and make sure that we're approaching things in a way that works for everyone. And when we say a way that works for everyone, it's really kind of doing the best that we can for the most people that we can. And that to me means that there will have to be in Waltham, in Massachusetts, in the United States, a turn from it's okay for some people to have so much and for other people to have nothing. That is not okay with me. And that is really kind of a basic value system by which I live my life. And it would be a basic value system with which I would participate in the governing of Massachusetts. And so thank you so much for letting me be here, for asking me questions, for talking with me. I really do appreciate it. And I would absolutely love to have your endorsement. It would mean a lot to me.
Thank you, and thank everyone for participating. The OR members in your district will be getting a ballot. They'll get access to this video and to your questionnaire. And thanks so much for sharing your time with us, Heather. And thank everyone for participating.
Yes, thank you. Thanks
yeah.
very much.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Heather.
Right.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Heather.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Are we staying on, Henry, or are we doing a discussion elsewhere?
Uh,
I guess we're doing